on, I wanted to bring up Rebuild. Last meeting, we had discussed with Tim and Hopkins and Mr. Klomparens about Rebuild Michigan. Renee Hessling is going to bring us up to date in terms of, or let us know what Rebuild Michigan is and give us more information in regard to that project, so that we have a better feel for what the possibilities are to participate. Oh, okay. I apologize, Superintendent Neal. We need a seat for her at the table. And I thought you were, do you want to sit up here or do you want to? Okay. All right.
These might be on. These are on. I know. That's... Thank you.
Marlene was diplomatic about that. I couldn't find it within the minutes.
Right, so I was trying to figure out the best way to say.
So we're going to go ahead and have Renee talk to us about Rebuild Michigan.
Okay, well, Rebuild Michigan is a program through the Michigan Department of Energy, and it focuses mostly on K through 12 schools, but also works with colleges and municipalities on going out and helping with energy audits. So they will come into a district and audit 10 buildings, and they have done more in some cases, to help a district identify, maybe some low-hanging fruit, or kind of prioritize in 3 categories, kind of low-hanging fruit that could be addressed maybe with behavior changes or some, just minor energy upgrades. And then also, the middle category, which may require a little bit of capital, and then major, things that need capital funding. So they come in, you would choose 10 buildings that you would want to start with. They probably have suggestions on what type of buildings, probably a good mix of old, new, maybe buildings that you think are using a lot of energy and maybe that should be upgraded. Mm-hmm. But you would have to sign an agreement with them. They have a mechanical engineer that comes in and does the audits, works with probably Ken and his team to do the walkthroughs. They would need 12 months worth of energy data to begin with on those 10 buildings, and then that's, the baseline that they start with. He did send me references on some of the projects that he's worked on recently, but they have worked with Detroit Public Schools, many of the schools in West Michigan. On a larger scale, they've worked with Grand Valley and Grand Rapids Community College in this area. So it's a free program. Take advantage of it. I've known Tim Shireman for a while, and he, I hear compliments on the work that they do all the time. So, the first step would be to, sign the agreement that they have, and it's out there online. Then would be to choose the 10 buildings, then submit the energy data for those 10 buildings, and then schedule the audits. And he said that probably a day, maybe 2 days, to do the walkthroughs of all the buildings to get a good feel.
Does anyone have any questions regarding Rebuild or?
Is this something that, Ken and the administration is comfortable with and want to be interested in moving forward with, or?
We've talked about this before and how we've utilized it, and I've gotten more feedback in regard to at the previous meetings about the consumer's energy piece and rebates that you guys are already maximizing. which is excellent. And it sounds like this piece hasn't been, and I think that this is part of the district shift to more sustainable programming, more of a pre-planning process, which I think you guys do sort of as a smaller committee when planning to do buildings. I would imagine, and I don't know for sure, and maybe Ms. Hessling can talk to this, is the piece about, for the LEED certified buildings, was there more of a pre-planning process of energy audits and that sort of thing? Because that's a big shift that I've been reading about, is you do a significant amount of work on the front end, figuring out what your losses are, where your problems are, how to optimize a building, and working cooperatively with many stakeholders, and then planning an actual renovation or building a structure. So this may work in terms of doing more of that pre-planning process, which you both, and I'm sure your whole division has a great feel for. This building's losing a lot of energy, but having somebody add some data may be very helpful. Do buildings that are going to be LEED certified and it's sort of a renovation, did you guys have to go through more of a pre-planning process and spell it out more? Okay.
We're comfortable with this. We'll go through and look at their agreement and make sure that there's nothing in there that doesn't work for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we can come back next month. I think we have a short break till the December meeting.
Mm-hmm.
If it's free, it doesn't technically need approval, but I think we should at least fill you in on our perspective.
Right, exactly, yeah.
I'm more comfortable with this than the free ones. We have had some free audits in the
Right.
past.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you get what you pay for. Bringing in a mechanical engineer means they're putting their license behind it. So I feel more comfortable with that than what we've gotten in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, if that can give us some guidance on how to, whatever we put into the buildings for equipment, some guidance on how to operate the buildings, it may come back and tell us we're doing pretty good.
Right.
But let's find out.
One thing that I've thought that might come through this as a protocol for the district is, let's say rebuild comes through and we see a common theme for upgrades. I would love to see us develop essentially a protocol for any time we're doing a warm, safe, and dry, where we essentially have a checklist, which is, 80% of the recommendations were to add 2 inches of foam to the roof. If we're putting a new roof on, at least a checklist that says, have you thought about putting 2 inches of foam on the roof? If there's reason not to, don't do it. But if that gets built into our rollout on projects, like we thought about, we went through our environmental checklist, here are the top 5, because LEED certification is great if you want a plaque on the wall, but if your actual goal is to save money, we can probably develop our own protocols that are going to capture a lot of this stuff without having to, district-wide.
And there's a record of it. While we may do a lot of that,
Right.
it may not be in the record for
Exactly.
10 years from now to know what was done and how it was handled.
Exactly. So if we can develop a little more discussion protocol about environmental stuff in the bid process and in everything we're doing, and if we can get it informed by this process, it may be a good way for us, if we see some common themes, to develop our own checklist template that becomes part of what boards see in the future.
And I,
Just add, though, we can also do that through the rules when we change our policy, we're looking at policy.
Yeah.
And so maybe that becomes part of the administrative rules, just so that we have an official record.
Right. Good point.
And I would say that he probably has a lot of tools just because of the experience he's had with other school districts across the state. So I've got a list of those school districts and be glad to pass that on with contact information.
Great. Good. Okay. Update on the U.S. Green Building Council Green Fellow. I'm just going to do a quick update more for keeping in our minutes, et cetera. Monica Scott has just done a nice article in that regard. And in my notes this morning, September 13, we had our rollout call with the U.S. Green Building Council about the Green Fellow, and then moving forward, the letters have gone out for the fundraising, so we're right on timeline in regard to getting the grant funding in place for their January sort of deadline. It's sort of a loose deadline, but, so I just wanted to update that we're right on track, and it's very, very exciting. Another update on the Green Revolving Fund. This is moving forward. It's sort of tabled a little bit in regard to we want to get policy in place and some rules and regs that make a lot of sense prior to trying to push this Green Revolving Fund through without having a lot of the policy work done, and that people aren't feeling we've got a lot more projects going besides just only majorly transforming education for the district. So I just wanted to update that. New business, the current policies, and I hope in the packet, I didn't review all of the packet, we have current policy that, and it's in the 4,000s, the policies are, and what I've included, and I apologize for the huge packet of papers, but I think that this is some research that I've been doing on my own in regard to do we want a statement on sustainability? Is that something that's important for the district to sort of, we're going to put a stake in the ground and this is where we want to be? Is this just greenwashing for our district? I think we need to sort of consider it as a committee and send that to the board. And then if the ad hoc policy committee wants to take over these policies, that's fine, or we can work through this in this committee. But I think looking at that, Colorado has a lot of initiatives. Of course, California has some as well. I looked at the stuff from Sacramento, Boston. It was interestingly difficult to penetrate their website, and I tried to contact the Green Fellow in Boston, and their email address was not correct for her. So I don't have information from her. I do have some stuff from Sacramento in here. And then Colorado Springs, this District 11 is just phenomenal. But Montecito Union School District did a sustainability plan, and Sacramento has sort of this statement on sustainability. Kelvin has a statement on sustainability. And I thought that might be something, I don't know, is it a waste of time for us to sort of throw that out? Or do we want to just only start with policy?
I think it's a great idea, and thanks for doing all the work on that. It looks like reviewing our policies, we're pretty quiet on this. I mean, there's one brief mention in there, obviously we could build it out. And, I fundamentally think that probably with a little bit of work, we could merge some kind of, take the bits we like out of these other districts.
Right.
And make this look significantly more targeted. I mean,
Yeah.
we're silent, we talk about asbestos, well, I mean, that's great. but That doesn't really drill down into current green concerns, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think these are great places to start from. I think it's a very, very good idea.
Okay, so, anyone else want to?
Well, I think just, with the new format that we have, finance this as an ad hoc policy, I think this is the vehicle to do the development of the policy in here. We need to have just a work session meeting with that is the agenda item. I think that's just the way to approach it, to get that done and start putting our thoughts on paper here.
Great.
But if Monica, I don't know if you want to make this your baby and look at, it seems to me that you've done a lot of the initial work, but I'd be happy to talk with you about coming up with something that we would then propose, sort of a packet to propose and stuff.
Sure, yeah, no, that would be great.
Essentially, you know, if we cut and paste best practices from other districts,
Yeah.
we'll probably come up with
And if we
one.
could tap Ms. Hessling too, she's got a lot of deep resources. Because I don't want to drag the district down in terms of pulling, and I don't want to dictate things either, but more this is what we're trying to focus on is board policy. And then when I stumble across some really nice rules and regs that read like a dissertation with a lot of great references, I've just been sharing it more to say, wow, here's some really substantial stuff, so people aren't reinventing the wheel. And then at some point, you guys can have a discussion about what works well for the district. But yeah, no, I think does that seem reasonable? Yeah.
It does. We also included several other policies that we thought were pretty connected and aligned with this initiative. So you asked for a few, but we gave you many.
Yes.
So just, in going through, we thought that those were all important. I would ask that even when you develop policy or a draft of a policy, that Ken and his crew be included in the policy so that it is broad enough and that it covers enough years, right? Because it's
Yeah.
really about beyond all of our tenure here, that we want to do the right thing, so that the policy is broad enough to cover.
Just like, for example, on the bus policy, just stick a line in there that says, we'll make a priority out of making sure that they're as clean and fuel efficient as possible. It's not in there now. Now it's all about not running kids over, which is after all your primary objective, to have the buses be safe. But we should also make sure they're fuel efficient, right? So that, we're not gonna have a policy that says they have to be compressed natural gas.
Right.
But compressed natural gas is an obvious thing for us to think about, for this group to think about proposing.
Yeah.
But policy level, we just want to establish clean
Right.
and fuel efficient
Right.
is good. That's all. we have to
Even
say.
these really dynamic, super gung-ho districts about efficiency really have very, very broad, thank you, policies. And then the rules and regs that they have chosen are much more, and then again, and nobody's stuck with something really prescriptive on what they have to do. It was interesting because the transportation policy, I wanted to bring that in terms of idling, what's the idling policy? And they're looking actually to find that 4320, I think, on the board policy website, it says that there is a rule, but then they couldn't exactly find it.
I was-
Dean owns the buses.
I would say,
Yeah,
it was
yeah. Okay, yeah.
the transportation policy is now dictated by a contract
Yeah.
we have with the
Yeah,
non-GRPS entity.
and that maybe is why it's not there any longer.
Absolutely.
And so, no, so I think that's legitimate, just as a housekeeping issue. Okay, 4320R, Dean.
Well, and actually, that raises another point, which is this group ought to think about ways to bring people into the conversation that we don't have direct supervision over.
That's right.
So, for example, compressed natural gas for fleets, it's an easy thing to do.
That's right.
Way lower CO2. If we don't own the buses and we don't run Dean, we can't make them do anything on that, but we might well invite them to a briefing session where we've outlined for them the advantages, the costs. If we pre-digest this kind of stuff for people,
That's
we
right.
can often get over the adoption hurdles. I mean, I've got a group working exactly on this for solar panels on churches right now. Churches don't understand solar panels. They don't know how much they cost. They don't know what their return's gonna be, but if you pre-digest a little bit of it, it makes adoption a lot easier.
And Kelly Dean, they're great partners, and I'm sure they would love to be a part of the conversation. I think that's great. I think it's awesome to invite them in.
Good. Let's see what else. Okay, excellent. So if we want to sort of decide to have another session or our next session in regard to just working through some of this policy, because I don't need to read some of these things for everyone in regard to our policies, and then everyone can have a chance to review what Teresa's also brought for us to look at. I think that's legitimate also. Yes. Review. Or do we, as an open meeting, need to have more of this discussion? What's your feeling, policy person?
done it both ways. I mean, there's been some policies, that I've just drafted a policy to bring to start the discussion with, and then it evolves from it. I think that's sometimes the easiest way to do it, is to have
I
a
don't think it's
policy
a
draft.
good utilization of people's time.
Right,
too.
so-
Yes.
but at least
Yeah.
you know, we're not fighting over the phrasing of sentences at that point, and, you know.
There's a reason why the phrase drafted by committee is a negative thing.
It takes for, and not to say that we're not willing to put the time in, but I think if you're obviously very well versed in the other policies, knowing some of the high points. So putting that on paper and then, you know, letting us, obviously, we have the source documents to back it up.
And feel free to do some extra looking.
Right, and
Yes.
certainly would love to, you know, be part of a discussion as you're drafting something. Just a private discussion of any questions or input, but.
Right, yeah.
I think that gives us a good foundation from which to move forward.
Good. So statement on sustainability, reworking some of these current policies, drafting other policies as we see.
Well, I guess my other
Good.
question too, will you be, adding a sustainability policy as its own enumerated line item in our board policy, and then amending some of the existing policies to kind of match that? I think
Or-
it's probably easiest to start with the
Or
the
even to
statement.
rewrite. We have like 5 or 6. We may need one.
Right.
I mean, we may need to,
Merge,
may be able to
yes.
merge these. That's why I wanted you to have all of them. It may be a line on one that would fit everything. I just don't know that you need 6 or 7 policies. So that's why we pulled all of them.
I would start with just doing the statement of sustainability, and
Just
then
a
kind of an
broad.
overarching policy, and then
That's right.
we as the community, I think that would be our role,
And we
then,
can
to go
add.
back through these existing policies and see where they overlap.
I agree.
Draw out, I mean, we'll still have to go through the process of, you know, formally amending them and having multiple readings of
Yes.
existing policies,
Right.
even if we're just deleting them. But that's,
Then it's
Brevity is
integrated
best.
into integrated into everything then, instead of having the
That's right.
separate policy and.
Yeah. No, I just want to
Make
make
it
sure
easier.
it's comfortable with the administration as well. Great, okay. So we've really burned through our first 4, 5, and 6 here, and then I did ask Mr. Hopkins or Mr. Comparents to talk about open access, because this was brought up at the last meeting, which is just an interesting, I'm just giving a little feedback or background about it. It's a huge way, in fact, that the district saves money, but we're only allowed to access open access in small aspects. So this can actually be part of a legislative platform that we're asking for this to increase to save us money on bidding out electrical, because we already do it for gas. So if you want to just reiterate everything we talked about, you told me on the telephone, that would be fantastic.
So on the electrical side of utilities, I want to say it was in '96, but don't quote me on that, the state opened up retail open access so that other electrical sources could bid against or service electrical against the local utilities in our area, Consumers Energy. At that time, the state opened up 10% of that. So whatever Consumers puts out at that time, 10% of that utility or 10% of that generation could come from an outside source. So that people like GRPS could say, okay, let's go buy our electric from another source. We might be able to save 2, 3, 4 cents at kWh. And we've been doing that ever since, I said, I think '96. The problem is that when they opened up that 10%, they figured it's gonna take a couple years to fill it up. It filled up in a few months. So all the capacity that was approved was already filled, and that's the way it's been left. And there's been a push, there's been some interest on the state level to increase that to some extent, whether that's 15%, 20%, you know, we don't know. But there's been some push, but nothing's been done.
is there is there competitive capacity from outside generators, I guess, to make that up?
Certainly. And presently, so what there is that the state is holding they have a waiting list. presently we have 13 facilities on open access purchase. I think we have another 17 maybe, I don't know what the number is, but we have another several buildings on a waiting list. So when the time comes that the state opens it up, at least we'll have a chance on getting 1 or 2 buildings in. I don't think we'll ever get them all in until they open up a higher percentage. And that holds true for anybody that's already in this. So, again, there needs to be a push back at the state level to increase that. We've been talking about it, but it hasn't been done. On the gas side, we've been purchasing natural gas on the open market, I think since 88, 89, somewhere in there. And that's district-wide. There was no regulations on that, so we purchase our gas from an outside source. We still have to pay our local utility to transmit that within the city gate, and pay them other fees associated with their billing, whatever processes. So we don't really have that problem there. So we do competitive pricing on gas district-wide.
For the whole ticket. I just think it's really interesting, that it's, so and I talked to John Hemholt, and we can send him the minutes, and talking to him in regard to, we need to build this into our legislative platform in regard to it. It's, a significant savings for us as well. As other districts, they're cutting our funding, they can at least throw us off.
You would think, saving us money, that should be a priority, wouldn't it be?
Exactly. Exactly.
All those.
Do you have anyone else have any questions for Mr. Hopkins regarding that?
No, the only thing I'd like you to look into, though, and this is in the other direction, and this might turn into a legislative priority. Do you know what the policy, what consumers' interpretation is of net metering currently? Is it building by building for us, or is it district-wide? The reason I'm asking is if let's say we put solar panels on Houseman Field. Well, if we put them on Houseman Field and we wind up being a net energy producer at that site, well, we're not a net energy producer district-wide. They'd cap our credits because they'd say we'd maxed out our net metering capacity at Houseman Field. If we're district-wide, we can put solar panels wherever we want, and we can site them according to where they'd be more efficient, as opposed to, like, right now, my house, you know about how this works for net metering, right? Just so everybody else understands. Basically, my house, I can't produce a surplus, or consumers isn't obligated to pay me for it. If my garage were a separate facility, then I couldn't put them on my garage. Consumers goes meter by meter for residential. I don't know what they do for the district.
I believe it is still
Meter by meter?
I believe so.
I wonder if we could get a ruling from somebody on that, and if not, maybe that's worth a legislative platform ad, is that net metering ought to be customer by customer, not meter by meter.
Well, and,
Because I can certainly see us generating surpluses in great solar
yeah.
locations that don't have huge draws,
which would be awesome.
and we wouldn't want to be hamstrung by that rule.
I had a discussion with Rachel Hood, the executive director of WEMIAC, and she was saying that they're raffling net metering.
That's a different thing.
Okay.
You're talking about premium tranches. I'm talking about the baseline law in the state for net metering. Anybody can do net metering as long as you don't go above zeroing out. You're talking about an incentive policy. And that's a different thing. That's been going on for some time. And it'd be great to get into that, but a conservative approach here is to clarify that net metering issue.
Yeah, and I just saw a presentation from consumers, and I'm pretty sure that it's by meter right now, not,
That's what I suspected, but that's silly. I mean, it should be customer by customer, and we should be treated as one customer.
Should be able to.
For the record, once we find out, would you work with John and maybe cabinet, so we can
Yeah.
learn more to come up with a policy or a legislative?
Exactly. That might be something where the energy subcommittee in the House just slips through a line item and reforms that for schools, and nobody opposes it, and we get it done in 4 seconds. It shouldn't be a primary legislative objective for us, but it's something that actually might be useful for the district, and presumably for every district in the state. Frankly, Right, right. It'd also be great for farmers, for example. I use about $5 worth of power at my barn right now. Well, that means I can put up about $5 worth of solar panels before I stop having a customer. Whereas I use a lot of other power at other meters. Well, if there was a one customer, one net metering policy on the state level, it'd be good for a lot of entities.
So do you want to just discuss the open access there as well and develop, sort of create that policy legislative?
Sure. I mean, they're
piece?
two different things.
They are two
One
different
is
things,
open
but
market supply and
energy
demand, the other
use,
is- right.
finances, and more just trying to,
Sure, have an energy policy, legislative position on,
Right.
on energy policy, generally.
right. Thank you.
Yep.
Good. Anything else you want to add? Okay, great, thank you. Next meeting will be during
25th.
break, yes. I don't think it actually is technically, that everyone will be closed. Are we having a finance meeting?
It's Monday.
16th?
Yeah, we're going earlier.
It's the
16th.
same day as the board meeting.
Yeah, it's the
Yep,
16th.
16th then. We had discussed meeting at the recycling center, which I think that week would be a big challenge. That may be something for the next year to do. So why don't we have our meeting after the 16th? Or do you want to just meet at some point and then see if we can get the policy? And we'll just assume this meeting's going to be the 16th and we can get some pre-policy stuff done prior.
Yeah, and if we
Okay.
don't have time, we can of course cancel the meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we feel like there's not enough actionable items, we can.
Right, absolutely.
Cool.
Yep, yep. We don't need to meet for meeting's sake. Good, meeting adjourned then tentatively at 16th, around 8:45.
So if you put